Accessing Agent Files. Brian Sovryn. Early 21st century anarchist. Creator and host of the podcast Sovryn Tech. By the year 2021, the show would be instrumental in the downfall of various conservative ideologies in the government, helping usher in an incredible time.
Hey, want to take a walk on the wild side and experience the bleeding edge of technology? Then get ready, because it doesn't get much more edgy than this. You're in for a wild ride. You're listening to Sovryn Tech with your host, the man in triple black, the golden stallion of the tech world, Brian Sovryn. He's got a huge brain. And now here's Brian.
It's showtime! Woo! Reporting from Ice Planet Zero at Deepshire 9. Oh yes, the golden stallion, the man of tomorrow. Ready for another little episode of Sovryn Tech, and boy, the news piled up this week, as it always does. But I got a lot of stuff to cover, particularly some of it I didn't get to last week, and so now's my chance. Of course, had the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy, the Duchess of Debauchery, on the show last week, and boy, we talked about the Bitcoin Foundation, and that got a lot of plays, and I'll let you know what, because it's because of Stephanie. You're absolutely What's that? Okay. You're absolutely right, love. It is because of you. Because honestly, like none of, when you get an episode that's really popular, and I've had a couple that have gotten a lot of plays, to where they rack into the 2,000 mark and all that. And it's funny because that almost never translates into an uptick for any other episode. It's only for that one. And so I think to talk, like topic specific is a failure. You cannot possibly keep building on that. I've kind of talked about that before on the show.
Now that you have a WordPress site, you might be able to see who's been linking to you.
That's true. Yeah. Now that I have that, in fact, that's the first thing that I want to bring up. But I do want to say that I am going to talk a little Bitcoin related news, Bitcoin 2.0 perhaps, during Tech Roulette. So if you do just listen to the show for Bitcoin, well, guess what? You're going to get a little bit in this one, but just a little bit. So new website. Please do go check this out. ZomiaOfflineGames.com. That's all exactly how it sounds. The word Zomia, Zomia. And I found out this week too, I was, dalliancing around Namecheap, and I found out that Zog.ninja, Z-O-G, as in Zomia Offline Games, and believe me, this Jew knows what ZOG also means. Okay. But Zog.ninja is available. I had no idea. I figure anytime these new even the newest of top level domains come out, especially cool ones like .ninja, as much as I have issue with the word ninja, I figured the 3-letter versions are like just instantly bought up, like that there was no chance. But Namecheap actually had a sale for like $288 for .ninja domains, and so I was able to grab Zog.ninja. Now, I don't want to do it to you right now, but in the future, I think I might just transfer everything to where, the email address would be, sovereigntech@zog.ninja or, Brian at zog.ninja. And then you could and right now you can actually, if you just type in zog.ninja, zog.ninja, it will take you to ZomiaOfflineGames.com. So, having shorter web addresses, I don't believe this whole crap that shorter web addresses or short names for your business or what you're doing actually helps you at all. I think that's nonsense. I think all it is, that's all about, advertising, is so that you can fit it into, not that it makes for bad advertising having a long name, but just so that you can fit it into, like a 30-second spot, a 30-second ad or a 60-second ad to give you more time to talk about other things instead of laying out the long name of your business. You can say that that's helpful for your business, but let's be clear that that's really the only area where it's actually helpful. The rest of the way, I don't think so. I really don't buy it. I mean, you just, take into consideration one of the most popular shows of all time, arguably, just about on anybody's metric, everybody's like, yeah, no, the show was amazing, even if they're not science fiction fans, was Star Trek The Next each generation. That does not roll off the tongue, folks. That is so long. So I don't think that having a short name is any kind of requirement. Having great content is a requirement. And if you want content, please, ZomiaOfflineGames.com. This is the new website. Sovryn Tech's hosted there now. I haven't gotten the 16 kilobit episodes up for the bandwidth impaired, or the bandwidth intelligent, perhaps. I don't want to say impaired because it makes it sound like it's a negative thing. As well as Dark Android is there. I will be hope maybe this week, if I get Hyperchronius finished up this week, we will get the Dark Android, like the full site up there. But the Dark Android's there. Whole slew, my blog is there. Whole slew of things. And the blog is really the best way to get a lot of the most recent news. And I have had people ask me for a specific RSS feed for the blog. I'll get to that. I will work on that because I can definitely see where that would be helpful. So anyway, do check out the new website, ZomiaOfflineGames.com or Zog.ninja. Take your pick of how you want to get there. But let's get into the random access. Like I said, we've got a lot of news to cover, especially in the random access. But some good news all around this episode too, or quite a bit through this episode. Microsoft. Now, last week I did mention, because last week's episode came out on April 5th, 2015, that was the exact 40th anniversary of the founding of Microsoft. And that's amazing for a company to really have the continued stamina that it does 40 years in. And it really is, let's be clear, Microsoft is still doing very, very well for itself. As compared to like where IBM's numbers look kind of funny, but IBM is a very unique animal. Sometime I'll talk about that more in the future. But Microsoft is going on, in the system that is the system I wish that didn't exist, but whatever. But they did some interesting things. In fact, I talked last week, Stephanie and I talked about how I really hate April Fools, like just despise it so much, and how it's turning into a whole week and whatever. And Microsoft actually created something. They did a good job. Okay. They pulled off an April Fool's trick, but it's something that's actually not just for April Fools, which is probably why it's actually pretty cool, is because it's not just a one-off and it's not bullshit. And what they did is they created for Windows Phone, they created MS-DOS for Windows Phone. And it's actually an app you can install. And they did this really funny ad for it, where they're kind of pulling off an Apple Johnny Ives sort of thing. It's like, well, we wanted to be as simple as we could with our new operating system. We're going right back to basics, and it shows, and you can do DOS, and you can type in, you can like edit the auto exec in it. There's all this really cool stuff. I saw that and I said, you know what? If that were actually a phone, I'd buy it. I think that's great. I'd love to have a phone that ran FreeDOS or something. I already run on my Android phone. I can run Windows 95 on it, actually. And I think they said that in the MS-DOS app, you could run Windows 3.1 in there, which I just thought it was cool. Good on them. They did it. I'm not saying Microsoft's a good company. I'm just saying good on them for doing an April Fool's joke that actually will stand the test of time, is actually functional, and is actually cool. Like it's a really cool thing. So I thought that was great. But speaking of a couple more interesting points with Microsoft, last week, this is, again, some of this news was meant for last week, but last week, Mark Russinovich was talking to Wired. Now, he is a major engineer at Microsoft, and he came right out and said, and this really took everybody by some degree of shock, didn't take me by shock, because I actually called this some time ago. In fact, I even asked how you felt about it, and I got some replies from some great Sovryn Tech listeners. He said that someday Windows may be open source. That's on the table. And I thought that was very interesting. And I felt a degree of vindication on that fact, because a lot of people that I asked how they felt about it did email me and say, you're fucking crazy. Well, Mark Russinovich seems to think not, that Windows very much could become open source. So always interesting to hear that. I look forward to that day. I think that'd be a fantastic thing to occur because, Microsoft, if already they're not charging for, like Windows 10, or at least if you upgrade within the first year, they're not going to charge for it. If your money's not in the operating system, which clearly it isn't by and large, then, what the hell? Why not do it? And if anything, it might be a great model for them to do. I just thought about this. Do like what Red Hat does, okay, where their enterprise is completely separate from their development of Fedora. Have the consumer version of Windows be, for consumers. And then you can charge, as they do, they can charge money, to the business, to the enterprise end of everything. And, maybe put in new features, close source some areas off, kind of like what Samsung Knox does or a BlackBerry does and whatever. Not that I support closed sourcing anything, but I'm just saying that there's a very viable way in which this could work for Microsoft, not just on the PR end, but on a logistics end to do this. And I think that's interesting. But that aside, and so I think that's definitely going to happen. It's going to happen soon. That aside, there was this week a major announcement or like a leak of sorts about what they are calling Redstone. Now, every version of Windows has kind of a code name. This isn't new news by any means, but every version of Windows has a code name throughout its life cycle. Like Windows 10 was actually originally called Threshold, then there was Longhorn. There's been quite a few different ones, and we found out about one called Redstone. Now here's an interesting thing, and I am just theorizing on this. Nobody really knows, other than that Redstone is going to come out in 2016. Nobody really knows what all this is about, and Redstone is actually a reference to Minecraft, okay, which is, of course, the very popular game, and the company Mahjong that made it, Microsoft bought them about a year and a half ago. And I think something else I predicted was that and this is way back before we knew it was going to be called Windows 10, and I was, originally everybody was expecting it to be called Windows 9. But I had said, what I think Microsoft's going to do? I think they're going to come out essentially with a gaming edition of Windows 10 for PCs. Now, this is interesting because Windows 10 is actually going to, the Xbox One is going to run Windows 10. What that looks like, I'm not really sure. Nobody really knows, okay? But there is essentially already going to be, to some degree, I already feel like my prediction was right on, is that there'd be a gaming edition of Windows 10. That's exactly what's going on in the Xbox One. And believe me, no one else is calling this stuff. No one else is saying this shit, okay? But I think that Redstone may actually be, and I could be wrong when the time comes, okay, but I think Redstone may actually be that PC version of the gaming edition of Windows 10. Most people are just saying it's going to be an update, like it's going to be the Service Pack 1 to Windows 10 or whatever, but I'd venture to have that specific name. I think that's going to be the deal, is that it will be that gaming edition that I had predicted that they were going to do, because they already, when they were at recent gaming conferences, okay, they've had their lead guys in their gaming departments at Microsoft saying that they recognize that they haven't been paying attention to PC gaming, and really the takeaway from all of their talking was that, and we'll talk about PC gaming actually during the Climax this week, but all that, in the end, everything you got out of all their talking is that they want a piece of the pie that Steam and Origin and GOG, and all these other services are getting. They want to be in on that. So making a gaming version, and as far as what that looks like, I mean, that's another topic for another time, but making a gaming version of Windows, I think is, we got a new company here, and I think that'd actually be a really intriguing thing, something that connected well, kind of like what SteamOS already does, where it's meant to connect to your TV and, in your house or whatever, and maybe works differently with HoloLens and things like that. I think there's a lot of possibilities there. So felt a bit of vindication, certainly with Rusinovich coming out and saying that Windows 10, could very well become open source, because a lot of people thought that was just, crazy town. But then, the idea that Redstone could be the gaming edition, that will be very interesting if that happens. So other news, whole shit ton to get through. SETI, I got this actually from a listener, and a great listener. And SETI is now, they're actually, we talked about, I did an episode a couple episodes ago where I talked about why aren't we finding, signs of alien life, in the universe, what's going on, and are they hiding it? Is it because they're in a Dyson sphere? Are we looking for the wrong signals? What's the deal? And now I find out that SETI is actually transmitting, because before they were just trying to receive alien, or signals of alien intelligence. Now they're actually transmitting, saying, hey, look at us, we're right here, come here, come here. Kind of like in Star Trek First Contact, where the Vulcans are passing through the star system, through the solar system, and they detect the warp signature from Zephram Cochrane's Phoenix warp ship, the very first Earth warp ship. And that's kind of the idea. And some people, actually, Steve Gibson talked about this on Security Now, and he said, "Oh, don't do that." It's like we might be asking for more trouble than it's worth. But I thought it was interesting. I don't know that it's going to be any kind of trouble if they received anything of that sort. But that's an intriguing thing to do, is like, well, because this is the logic, is that if we're not receiving anything, from any of these races, alien intelligences or whatever, maybe they just never got far enough. Maybe they hit the great filter, that point of the singularity, or essentially. And because of the great filter, you end up with the great silence, and they never made it that far. And so SETI is pretty much making sure, so I kind of support this idea. SETI is making sure that stuff is getting transmitted, so that, say there's alien intelligence, millions of years from now or whatever, that evolve and develop on other planets, they will know that we were here. Just in case when any species hits the great filter, and you can look up about the great filter to find out more about that, just to make sure that other life has existed in the universe. So not a bad idea, but something that was really interesting that I mentioned, Steve Gibson talked about this a little bit, but Steve Gibson also got an email from a listener of his show, Security Now, and the person said, we want to encrypt everything. All our communications. And of course, certainly on Sovryn Tech, we talk about that all the time, how we want to encrypt all the things. Why wouldn't the aliens encrypt everything? And it was a really simple point of logic, and it made a lot of sense that maybe they've figured out how to encrypt everything they've ever sent out. And it's hard to believe that they did that, because you'd think before they learned the importance of encryption, if they followed a similar path of logic that we have as humans, that they would still transmit something unencrypted out there, and we should be able to receive that or whatever. But maybe that's the case. Maybe these alien intelligence encrypted things. But I'm still holding out. I still am a proponent of the Fermi paradox. And, which essentially says that life is just incredibly rare, not just the Fermi paradox, but I believe that the elements that it took for life to start on Earth, which there's some interesting science about that this week. They showed how life spontaneously could theoretically, come into being, before it can even get to the RNA structure of it all. But that it's such a complex, such a, amazing amount of not chance, but, for lack of a better word, the chance, the numbers of, the odds that it takes, for a species like humanity, complex life. I believe there's tons of not complex life out there. Okay. Maybe even animals or things like that, but really totally complex life, that has, real faculty of its instincts and consciousness and whatever. I think that's really rare, just based on that math alone, because the Drake equation doesn't take that in. Anyway, enough about alien intelligences. And certainly, of course, as I always say, I don't believe aliens have ever visited the Earth. It didn't happen. So let's go on here. Google's Nova. This is now their Project Nova is their MVNO. That's their mobile carrier that will run off of, or bounce off of, Sprint's and T-Mobile's carrier lines. So this is similar. There's like Boost Mobile, Virgin Mobile. There's a whole Echo Mobile. There's a whole bunch of these that actually they use the lines of the major cell phone carriers, or they use the signal. It's not actually lines anymore, right? And they give you a better deal with it. Okay, and so and that. How does all that work? Well, of course, the MVNOs, which is what they're called, mobile virtual network operator or whatever, they will, paying out that money to Sprint or T-Mobile or AT&T or whoever's doing it actually allows that, it's a money-making deal for Sprint. So Google's Project Nova is coming, and one of the interesting things that came out of this is that there was the rumor that Nova would allow for free international roaming. And I think that it may be more than rumor, because just a couple days ago, Sprint announced that they are giving free international roaming in various countries, Germany, Mexico, Japan, UK, a whole slew, Chile, Nicaragua, I think, a whole bunch of different countries. Sprint, which I'm happy for because I use Sprint, because they're the only one that offer genuine unlimited data. But so I think that fear alone of that Google was going to put that out there, maybe they just reacted to the rumor, or maybe Sprint knows, which of course their parent company, SoftBank, maybe they know that this is really going to happen, that Google's Project Nova, and it's been confirmed that Nova's a real thing. Sundar Pichai finally kind of like begrudgingly said that it's legit, that's accurate. So they know it's coming, and so, Sprint's just getting ahead of the curve, and good for them. I mean, I guess this is the nature, to some degree, of competition in the marketplace, right? So that's out there. China Nick. This was something that a lot of people, this was news I didn't get to last week as well. China Nick. China Nick is this, it is a company, okay, in China that gives out certificates, security certificates for websites, the whole HTTPS thing, all that good stuff, SSL certificates. And apparently Google just came out of nowhere and said, we're blocking, because again, they are the gatekeepers, because they have Chrome. The web browser is really where, the client is where every battle in tech is going to be proverbially fought. Okay. And this is proof of that, because in Chrome, if Chrome registers a certificate from China Nick, it won't let you get to the site. Okay. Or it's going to give you the warning, whatever. And this is really, Google strong-arming. Now, no one's really come out and necessarily said there's some, theory as to why they're blocking China Nick and whatever, there's security holes, you take your pick. As far as the reality behind all that, not even I'm sure. But I think the real story about all this is just showing you the importance of having a really open browser at your disposal, which Chrome would seem not to be. Okay. Now, certainly there's a security side of this. It's like, yeah, well, thank you, Google for being very, for being concerned about my security. But the line between security and censorship, okay, and when I say security, I don't mean privacy. Those are two separate things. The line between security and censorship can be awfully thin at times. And so keep this in mind as a case in point where, regardless of what happens with the internet, okay, if the gateway to that system, to that ecosystem, that infrastructure that is the internet, is controlled by, someone malicious or someone with their own agenda, and it's not open, i.e. Google Chrome, yet that's something to consider and worry about. And we're seeing the first cases of that, of, real internet censorship doesn't have to happen through legislation. It doesn't have to happen through CISPA, SOPA, PIPA, whatever the fuck you want to call those alphabet soup bills that are going to go through. It doesn't have to happen at the website level. It doesn't have to happen at the server level. All that has to happen is at the client side, at the client level, and all Google has to do is say, nope, you're not going to access this shit, with Chrome, and you're fucked. Unless you have alternatives. Now, of course, there's alternatives. Firefox is a great alternative. There's Safari. There are open alternatives. But the interesting thing is that everybody's spending all their time developing everything for one system, that being, WebKit, one engine, or Blink, depending on which version it is. So that's concerning. If everybody's developing stuff just for Chrome, and yet, in the future, say Google starts strong arming some more, on things, as the gatekeepers, that can become a problem. So that's something to really keep in mind. But we might have a solution to talk about with that in later on in the show. Speaking of Google, also a little more news. Google may be buying Twitter. That rumor popped up again, and Twitter's stock just skyrocketed for, a day or two because of that. And, this has been talked about before. Actually, years ago, there was talk of Google buying Twitter. And I think the only reason there might be a little more credence to it this time around is that Google search, google.com and Twitter recently kind of reintegrated to where they work nicely together again. This is just a couple months ago. So this might be a reality. I could believe it. I mean, in a world where, because you'd say, well, Twitter's so popular, Twitter, I mean, what are they going to sell it for, $50 billion? Well, in a world where AT&T will pay $52 billion for Dish, for Dish, Dish Network or whatever, Dish TV. Yeah, I think any company buying any other company is an absolute reality. Like, there's no reason that couldn't happen. So some other really quick news. Let's see, Telegram, which is one of my favorite, messaging systems because it works so well cross-platform on the web, on Android, iOS. You take your pick on, there's even like a great native client for a lot of operating systems. It's really good stuff. Telegram. And yes, I know you don't have to email me and say, well, what about this danger of Telegram? Steve Gibson even said blah, blah. I know. Okay. But they put in 2-factor authentication in their native apps this week. So that's anytime you can turn on 2-factor authentication, I always recommend that. And I think that's a very good thing. But speaking of messengers, Facebook actually this week, this was interesting. Facebook, they now have a specific Facebook Messenger web portal, website, kind of like what they did with WhatsApp. And you can go to that website and all it is just Messenger. And obviously this is, this comes to fruition out of where at F8 a couple weeks ago, they said they want to turn Messenger into a platform where there's a bunch of apps that just work with Messenger. And so turning Messenger into its own thing, what a shock, right? I mean, this is like the aforementioned Telegram. Telegram has a web portal, web app essentially that works for it. So I'm not surprised by this at all. And I know a lot of people that say they only use Facebook for the Messenger. They don't even look at their news feed. And so obviously this website's for them. They'll probably also make, I imagine in the future, there's going to be a specific website for groups, for Facebook groups, much like there's a separate app. I think that's a logical extension of this line of thinking. So, and I've used, I checked it out. What does this look like? How does it all operate? And it's a slick implementation. Facebook is completely heinous. That's all. So anyway, one last bit, with the Apple Watch, their pre-orders did go through, and then I will get to, boy, like I told you, there's a lot to talk about this week. The Apple Watch, their, pre-orders went out. Also the reporters that had, or, the tech journalists that were given, preview models to wear and test out, they were allowed finally to break their great silence and let everybody know, okay, how do you feel about the Apple Watch? The interesting thing is that the average Apple fawning that occurs generally when a new product comes out didn't occur this time. There was, a lot of the reviews seemed, for lack of a better word, skittish, trepidatious, perhaps. And I find that interesting because that's kind of unique for the past decade for Apple, that people aren't just like, oh, how did I ever exist on planet Earth without this Apple device? I must have it, but that's really not how it happened. And so that makes me wonder if if that whole idea that the Apple Car was bullshit, that it wasn't real, which we've talked about in recent episodes previous, we mentioned the theory that the Apple Car news was actually to take thunder away from the Apple Watch, or if the Apple Watch ends up being a dud, that you can wait for the next best thing, which will be the Apple Car, but that the Apple Car really isn't real. I think this lends some credence to that, because if the tech journalists aren't fawning over this damn thing, Apple may have a problem. Yeah, it's going to sell great. No one's arguing it's not going to sell big, but it may not have that lasting impression like the iPod, the iPhone, and the iPad have had. So, but that said, the reviews for the MacBook, just straight up the MacBook, not the Pro or the Air, but the MacBook that comes with gold and all that stuff, that also people started getting their orders of that in, and people are absolutely loving that device, which is, that's pretty interesting. And, something I never mentioned with the MacBook, I think one of the reasons, because I was a little excited about it too, and the reason I was actually excited is because it was fanless. And that doesn't mean it's ventless right now, as I understand it, but it is fanless. And the thing I like about fanless computing is that gets us one step closer, perhaps. And also, and this may be, a sign of things to come from Apple, because we talked about in previous episodes, we talked about how the Taptic, which is what the Force Touch, as they call it, which sounds like something from Star Wars, but it's not, where the pad on the MacBook the touchpad is like there's no physical buttons. It all uses, little motors and everything and uses Force Touch. And they talked about how they're already putting in patents. Apple was putting in patents for that to be done for the keyboard as well. Okay. And I think now there's already companies kind of doing this, MSI and some others, but I think it's interesting because if you create a Taptic keyboard, okay, and you have the Taptic touchpad, and then you have the fanless device, the interesting thing for me, and I haven't really heard anyone else say this, but the interesting thing for me is the creation of a waterproof computer. That's the beauty here that I think could happen. And that's one of the reasons I was excited for, not necessarily for the MacBook itself, but for the technology and for the acceptance of this and for the development that we can run. It doesn't have the best processor in the world, but the processors that can at least run a modern system like OS X, have the ability to run fanless, and thus we get one step closer to creating those really indestructible computers that I would love to get my hands on. I'd love to have a waterproof computer for a million reasons. Not that I plan on doing anything, under the sea as far as computing's going, but not that I wouldn't mind that either, but just in general, to know that your device is going to last. I have a waterproof phone. I love that. That's so damned handy to have. So anyway, that's what excites me about all that. But there we go. We've gotten through all the random access finally. Let's get into the main story because it's an interesting one. And I think in many ways it proves a point. So let's do it. And this story comes from TechCrunch, and it's with tech. What's old is new again. And I think there's some really interesting insights here. And of course, I want to share, my opinions on what gets said here in a minute. So let's read the story here. When you watch the technology industry long enough, you begin to see some of the same ideas recycled. Maybe they didn't catch on the first time because they were too early, or maybe someone out there today believes they're smarter or can throw more money at the problem and succeed where others couldn't. Technology tends to run in cycles, and as it evolves, some early failed attempts might be worth another look in the context of more modern infrastructure. In several instances lately, whether streaming video or meal delivery, everything old has become new again. Streaming video, been there, done that. Let's start with video streaming darlings Meerkat and Periscope as a prime example of this phenomenon. These apps take advantage of increasingly sophisticated mobile phones, better mobile broadband, and higher quality cameras on your smartphone to broadcast whatever you're seeing. For all the hype driving these apps, you would think it's an innovative idea, but it's not new. In fact, several companies like Quick and Flixwagon tried this way back in 2007. The founders of these services understand the power of broadcasting from a cell phone. They were just a bit ahead of their time. In fact, I write about these video streaming tools, I wrote about these video streaming tools in a feature on streamingmedia.com in September of 2008. Quote, cell phones and cheap video cameras have put the means to create and broadcast video instantly into the hands of ordinary people. When you compound that with new online tools that make it dead simple to upload video or stream live from a cell phone, virtually anyone can broadcast their own lives or what they are seeing in the world around them. Whether this has any real commercial potential beyond novelty and narcissism, that's a key point, is still very much open to question. Skype bought Quick in 2011 for $150 million, and Flixwagon is still out there, although its case study examples on its website date back to 2008. Meerkat and Periscope have captured our imagination as though they were some amazingly original idea. The founders of Quick and Flixwagon could be called the smartphone video pioneers who just came up with the idea too soon. I'm going to read on before I comment on a lot of this. Reading on, information rights management makes a comeback. Back in 2008, just as the cloud was beginning to edge into people's consciousness, companies tried to protect documents on the move, which at the point usually meant email, using a concept called information rights management. It was essentially digital rights management, or DRM, but instead of trying to protect a piece of digital content like a song or a movie, it was trying to protect a document on the move outside the firewall. The idea was sound, but in reality, at that point in time, it required that the document phone home to a server to check on its status. Is the document still valid, or have the rights been revoked? As I wrote in an article in eContent in May 2008, quote, IRM enables an organization to build policies around documents document types, and user groups, and to apply a set of rules to ensure that you can apply an element of control when employees share documents. This guarantees that, for instance, a document will expire by a certain date, or that only a trusted group can even open a given document. And because the document is always controlled at the server level, it means you can always revoke rights if the situation warrants it. End quote, he wrote at the time. Well, today a startup called Veridox wants to apply the same types of protections, but instead of going through a server behind the firewall, it's going through the cloud, where it's much simpler and more practical to apply. It's taking the old IRM concept and applying it in a more modern context. Now, Stallion, breaking in here quickly, the real actual innovation for this won't come from a company like Veridox. This is much of what, like proof of existence and things like that a lot of blockchain technology companies are wanting to do. And that will be a much easier and more secure implementation of this. Now, IRM, keep in mind, IRM isn't necessarily, about, like, where DRM is often about you not having control of the ability to copy, something that you purchased. IRM is a very different animal from DRM. IRM is more about, encryption and security. And actually it is about, you or, whatever you're doing, having control over the information that you put out there. IRM isn't necessarily a terrible thing. It can be. It very much can be, just as DRM is an absolutely terrible thing. But IRM in some circles can be a very helpful thing. And that's something, your own opinions, of course, are always, warranted. And I encourage you to have them. So reading on, Bring Me the Food again. What was once the butt of jokes can quickly become today's hit. Webvan is often held as a symbol of the excesses of the 90s tech boom. A startup to bring you groceries on demand? What decadence! As Peter Rollan wrote on TechCrunch in 2013, quote, Webvan is well known as the poster child of the dot-com excess bubble that led to the tech market crash in 2000. Business schools around the nation study Webvan's overly ambitious rush to the biggest IPO to date in Silicon Valley as a prime example of what to avoid doing while scaling, end quote. And now Instacart, years later, has raised hundreds of millions of dollars at a multi-billion-dollar valuation. Kicker, the company was founded in 2012, less than 3 years ago. That means Instacart has raised more than $2 million per day since it was born. You could say that with smarter phones, better broadband, and cheaper cloud services, the technology is in place for an approach like this today. Back in the 90s, you had to pick up the phone or order through a website, which was a fairly radical idea at the time. Now, let's go into another one. Another try at messaging platforms. Then we have the Facebook messaging platform. Some may say this has the height of creative thinking on Facebook's part, but actually it's not. It's a variation of an idea that many companies were trying around instant messaging platforms back in the early 2000s. Back in those days, you couldn't go to a conference that didn't have several corporate instant messaging vendors trying to convince everyone that IM was going to be the center of enterprise computing. You would build your enterprise infrastructure on top of your IM platform. It didn't happen, of course, but at the time, there were companies devoted to this, like FaceTime Communications, which later became Actiance, and pivoted away from IM to archiving, governance, and compliance. I wrote an article about this phenomenon back in 2003 for eCenter magazine. Quote, beyond communicating in real time, the instant messaging system provides the ability to take advantage of what is called presence awareness, which is the ability to see that someone is online and accessible. You can extend this concept so that not only people can see who is online, but applications can do this as well. According to Jeremy Dyes, offering manager presence and instant messaging for IBM Lotus software, IBM is beginning to see a movement away from simple messaging ability to more sophisticated uses that take advantage of presence awareness, end quote. Now, Facebook wants to build a consumer platform on top of Messenger. This sounds pretty similar to this approach from the early 2000s. It may be oriented toward consumers, although Zendesk is one enterprise company using Messenger to let their users talk directly to customers, but it's comparable approach in terms of building more sophisticated applications on top of the base communications platform. Now, Stallion cutting in again. I told you that, believe me, Facebook wants to become your identity, and there's Facebook for Business. So absolutely, they are copying IBM's playbook from 15 years ago, if not longer, because IBM will have ideas in store for decades before they let it out. Lots of big companies from back in the day would do that. Kodak came up with the digital camera in the 70s. Not many people realize that, but they didn't release it until the late 90s. So this is pretty interesting stuff. I'm going to read on here. Computing power here, computing power there. My personal favorite instance of the ebb and flow of technology trends is where computing power is located. Before PCs, computing power was inherently tied to large, immobile installations. Later, personal computers made their way into the homes of billions, decentralizing processing power. Next, the internet made it possible to access computing power located in other places. The rise of the cloud and its inherent centralization of processing power has blossomed at the very same time that smartphones have put powerful computers in the pocket or purse of an increasingly large portion of the planet. But the irony doesn't stop. Those same smartphones with their speedier processors, faster networks, and increasing size depend on data centers all the time. The apps that smartphones run often lean on computing power stored off device. So while we can't live without the cloud and can't live without our smartphones, we're really just seeing and enjoying the seesaw of the balance of compute location continue to gyrate. And then there's one last segment here that I want to read on, then I want to talk about this. Can recycled ideas actually work? Just because an idea isn't original doesn't mean it won't succeed. The world may be more ready for these concepts than when the early companies made their first attempts. When it comes to streaming video, it's still not any clearer how these companies will make money than it was back in 2007. But surely users, the technology, and the infrastructure are more prepared for this type of tool. Technology has evolved in a big way over the last 10 to 15 years. We have smarter smartphones that are truly computers in our pockets. We have developed cloud infrastructure that as recently as 2008 was still in its infancy. And we have much faster broadband with 3G, 4G, and LTE connections driving use cases that were once on the edge of plausible and creating businesses we hadn't even imagined. And let's not forget that the evolution of the app ecosystems and social networks, which also have acted as a driver of this technology, letting people share their ideas and bring their friends along, all driven by the ease of apps, the availability of our smartphones, and the connection to the cloud. Meerkat became a phenom last month, riding a viral wave on social networks like Twitter and Facebook, social systems that were just taking off or didn't even exist when much of this technology was developed. All of these technologies have one thing in common. They were tried before, and the results weren't great, partly because the world simply wasn't ready and the technology infrastructure wasn't in place. That's why we'll continue to see older ideas recycled like this, because when it comes to technology, what's old becomes new again, and maybe this time the world will be ready. Now, a lot to take in there, but this is really great. And the reason I think this is really great is because I have talked about this many, many times. A lot of people, when I start talking on Sovereign Tech, when I start talking about, hey, let's use Usenet again, let's use IRC again, let's, go down the list of the older technology, that some of which largely is, even pre-World Wide Web. Okay. But was far more secure, far more decentralized. It's ready to go. It's still hotly used in other parts of the world or by people perhaps, of more interest in using it, even in the US or, the colonies or, wherever that happens to be. Okay. This is the thing is that no one's talking about going back in time. No one's talking about let's get back to this technology. Let's get back to, let's go backwards. Let's slow things down. We're not necessarily saying that. And I think there's times maybe where I did say slow it down. Okay. But what I mean by that more is pay attention, to what's getting developed. So I'm not saying slow down, but this is the thing is that things, implementations, technological implementations like Usenet, like IRC and others are just coming around. Technology, it's a cycle. It's just coming back around. And I think as we realize how, a lot of the centralized systems that we have today, like the World Wide Web and others, when we realize that, when we see what that can do very quickly, because of the scalability of all this, then we can say, okay, well, let's try this one again. Let's try this again. It's not like we're going back to square one. Okay, but it's more like we're going to square one cubed. Well, that wouldn't be a good example because it'd be one. but you know what I mean? It's kind of re-exploring and seeing where we can, do it, what we can do to bring that into, perhaps the modern infrastructure, into the modern hardware. Okay. I think this is a really exciting thing to read, is that people realize that, yes, technology is cyclical. It's not like you're going back in time. It's not like you're a Luddite or something like that. It's just saying, okay, the world wasn't ready at the time, but believe me, ever since the Snowden revelations, the world is ready for, our information not being plastered all over the goddamn place and being able to get cracked by malicious actors, that want to use it for whatever reasons those, whatever they may be. And I think this is something that's coming. I think there is going to be a general, first off, I think that, the tech bubble that they talked about that happened, obviously it's infamous, that happened in the late 90s, and early 2000. That we're really seeing the signs of something like that happening again. Okay. But we're also seeing that due to mobile computing being a thing, that a lot of those ideas that were considered the excess of the late 90s, the tech boom, can actually work. It just needed a different infrastructure. And that's it. That's all, that's all I'm ever want. I want multiple infrastructures to try all this stuff out, to, all these different infrastructures. I think it's really, really exciting that the wheel is turning. Okay. And so that's what I mean. Tech, it goes in a cycle. When I say, let's get back to using Usenet and stuff like that, I'm not saying, let's go backwards. I'm saying, let the cycle come around. I think it's incredibly exciting, that this is happening. But and there's points of it that are worrisome too. Facebook, what they're doing with Messenger, and things of that nature. That's there's a lot of bad ideas. There's not just good ideas like Usenet and IRC and others, that had open standards and all of that. There's not just all good ideas. There are some bad ideas too that might come back around. And there's certainly some new good ideas, totally new ideas to be explored that we just never could have imagined because of the different infrastructures. But we need all of this. I think this is a really interesting thing, to talk about. I mean, like streaming video. Obviously, this has been popular for a very long time with a group known as cop blockers, right? They used Quick back in the day, Bambuser, and some others. And then suddenly, but nobody paid attention to that. Nobody paid attention to the wonderful uses that it already had for activists, for people interested in their freedom and whatever else. Nobody paid attention. But once Madonna can put her new video up on Meerkat, now the technology has a purpose. And that's the thing. Don't wait for the shit to be popular to jump on it. A lot of the ideas that you have that you want to do, the technology already exists. If you want private communications again, okay, there's already very old systems that can be used. If you want to, be off the World Wide Web grid, as it were, if you want to be off the big bad internet, okay, there's already technologies that exist that you can jump on it. You don't have to wait for that technology, because yeah, I actually had some people ask me, hey, would you be willing to Meerkat Sovryn Tech? No. Yeah, I mean, that's very nice that you'd want to see me doing the show and whatever. And I imagine it's pretty entertaining to see me, waggling my arms around, but okay. But I'm not doing that. I mean, like if I wanted to do that, I would have done it already. I'm not interested on being on the wave of what's popular in consumer culture. I'm interested in shit getting free. And the shit that's getting free, I guarantee by and large, really isn't in consumer culture. Perhaps it shouldn't even be. Like Bitcoin. Or some others. But I'll talk about, maybe I'll elaborate a little bit on that in the next segment. You're listening to Sovereign Tech.
Hypercronius is coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. If you'll excuse me. You're not Natalia. Who are you?
Oh, hello, Mr. Sovryn. Natalia is on another mission. I'm Elizabeth. I'm here to debrief you.
I'd love for you to debrief me, but how did you get in my room?
The bellboy let me in.
Well, hooray for the bellboy.
Tech Roulette.
It is time for Tech Roulette, where I cover the stories that get sent in to me through the various channels available. And of course, you can go to sovereigntech.ninja or zomiofflinegames.com or zog.ninja. You take your pick of which web address you want to put in there. And if you go to the Contact Us tab, you can actually now, you don't even have to send me an email. You don't have to, the email address is brian@zomiofflinegames.com, but you don't even have to know that. There's a contact form there that you can use, and below that contact form is all the other ways you can get in touch with the show. Telegram, BitMessage. There's a whole slew there. Even my Minilock ID is there, which we'll talk about Minilock a little bit during important messages. Plenty of ways to get in touch. And of course, along the top of the page are my social media links, as well as the RSS feed for the show. Lots of, plenty of ways to get in touch. Even my Steam IDs it's in the top right. So, and you can follow the show on SoundCloud, and there's great ways to comment on SoundCloud. Some people have shared stories by commenting on the actual sound on SoundCloud. So there's so many ways to get in touch. Also, though, I want to say that next to the Contact Us tab is the Support Us tab, and if you want to check that out, there's Patreon, which we'll talk about in a second, or in the second bit of the segment. There's Patreon. You can sign up to be a patron to Sovryn Tech and Zombie Offline Games and Dark Android in general, all of that. That's there. There's also all the crypto addresses, Bitcoin, Litecoin, NXT, and even Namecoin is there. Also, PayPal, you can set up a monthly subscription if you would, or a monthly donation if you'd like, or a one-time donation. Some people have made very gracious donations to me. Believe me, they help me out a ton. So plenty of ways to donate to the show, to contact to the show, and sharing on social media also helps as well, as much as I despise social media. So please, take advantage of all of this. So anyway, let's get into it. We've got something, when you're wrong, you're wrong. Not that I was wrong, because if the evidence stands at the time that you're right, well, then you're right at the time. But, then you get proven wrong. And as anyone that's interested in science should do, when the evidence shows the opposite, you should change your mind. Okay. Or, you should bow to the facts, essentially. And, this was interesting. Actually, this is from Ian Thompson, who is he's out of Britain. Well, maybe he doesn't live in Britain, but he's from Britain, I believe. And just a great tech journalist. But he wrote up a science story. And of course, Sovryn Tech is a show about science and technology and how it can help set you free. But he did a write-up in the Register this week about the Brontosaurus. I know you weren't expecting me to say that. Okay, but the Brontosaurus it's one of the most famous dinosaurs throughout the time that we've known about dinosaurs. T-Rex and Triceratops and Stegosaurus, it's right up there with all those guys as being incredibly famous. Now, in 1987 or 89, and I've talked about this on Sovryn Tech, and that's why I want to make the correction and make it known. In 1989, there was, it pretty much came out that actually it was, the Brontosaurus was like an Apatosaurus body with a Diplodocus head, I believe, on top of it. And so that's why in Jurassic Park, there's no Brontosaurus or Brontosauri in Jurassic Park in the movie that came out in 94. There was a Brachiosaurus, which was a known, yes, this dinosaur existed because, apparently the Brontosaurus was just a fluke. It was a mess up. It was a sham. Well, come to find out, some researchers actually, and there's a link in the show notes, of course, sovereigntech.ninja, you can find the show notes, that goes into the story about how they found out that yes, the Brontosaur actually is different from the Apatosaur. So I think, or from Apatosaurus. And so I think that's really interesting, but I wanted to get that correction out there. Maybe they'll change their mind again, but the researchers that actually discovered this, came out and said, look, by the best way that, by our science in the 80s, yes, those people were absolutely right to think that the Brontosaurus was not a separate dinosaur, that it was just an Apatosaurus with the wrong head. Okay. So it's one of these things that happens in science, but it also shows the beauty of science that you don't stop, you keep testing your theories and, in the end, you may actually be right. And because, you went through scientific rigor, you get to do that. And then people can say, well, okay, now there's a Brontosaurus. And so, if you know of companies that make dinosaur toys, maybe now I'm not giving you investment advice, but maybe now's the time to go buy some stock in those toy companies, because they're going to be releasing a whole lot of fucking Brontosauruses now. Anyway. Let's get into the main story for Tech Roulette, and this is an interesting development, but I think it has a twist that I'm not hearing from anybody else. So of course, the Golden Stallion's got to bring it on. And this story is from CoinDesk, which is a very popular, though sometimes questionable, as far as their integrity. But CoinDesk, this comes from, they're very famous in the Bitcoin community and the cryptocurrency and crypto 2.0, crypto equity space. And it's why a new SEC ruling could be revolutionary for Bitcoin crowdfunding. Now, of course, SEC is the Securities Exchange Commission, which in the U.S. pretty much controls the bulk of trade and finance, all that good stuff. So let's read the story here. On Wednesday, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission adopted regulations permitting crowdfunding for business startups. The new rules give businesses in the blockchain ecosystem an avenue to get financial backing from the best educated investors out there, their users. I wrote last week about the challenges that Bitcoin 2.0 companies face from the squishy definition of a security under U.S. law. These new rules don't resolve that ambiguity, but they do create a low-cost safe harbor for businesses that want to avoid uncertainty and possible criminal exposure by simply treating their token sales as a sales of securities. Here's how it works. Prior to these rules, a company could generally sell securities only to wealthy individuals or after going through expensive registration with the SEC. Like generally you had to be registered and have something like, you have to make like over $250,000, a year. Like it was really specific, stallion breaking in is really specific as far as, who could buy equities in say a new crypto startup. Or any startup for that matter. Now, companies can file a mini registration statement with the SEC, still asking for permission. I added that in, and then sell securities to ordinary people, including over the internet. As an added bonus, state-level compliance under these rules is minimal, as the SEC has largely preempted state securities laws in this area. There is, of course, a whole bunch of fine print. Businesses that choose this route, for example, will need audited financial statements and will have to do some ongoing reporting to the SEC. There are also limits on how much capital you can raise this way, though those limits, 20 million or 50 million, depending on which tier of the rule you use, are unlikely to pose problems for most companies in the space because they're dealing with significantly less money. Similarly, companies can accept only a certain amount of money from each investor, but again, the limit is relatively high, 10% of each investor's wealth or yearly income, and even better. Companies can generally rely on investors to self-certify that they've met this requirement. Other details are more mundane, but also put this firmly in the don't try this at home category. There are rules about sales by affiliates, rules about pre-sale solicitations of interest, and lots of rules about what goes on in the mini registration statement. Prior bad acts, quote unquote, can also disqualify a company from using the provisions, and only U.S. and Canada-based and incorporated issuers qualify. These new rules are good and potentially revolutionary for Bitcoin 2.0 companies. But they're also good for all companies in the Bitcoin ecosystem who can take advantage of them to raise capital from their tech-savvy pool of users. Selling securities this way still isn't a walk in the park. It will place some additional burdens on companies and require careful legal advice, but it is decidedly good news that companies can now count this path as among their options. Now, again, this doesn't just relate to Bitcoin companies. This has broad reach for anything that gets crowdfunded. Okay, but I know a lot of people are very excited about this, especially in the Bitcoin and the Bitcoin 2.0, crypto 2.0 space, however, whatever words you want to fucking use in the blockchain space, you take your pick. Okay, because this allows them to this eliminates some barriers. But I think there's a point that's being missed here. What this is actually about, because again, people are, it's like, oh, the SEC finally did something right. Holy shit, this is great. I mean, people are really, really happy about this. And a lot of people want to get their projects, crowdfunded and funded by using this, particularly in the Bitcoin space, in the token space, or the crypto space again. But I don't think that's what this is really about. I don't think the SEC is throwing a bone. What this is about you, the, Bitcoin company, crypto company, whatever, developer. It's about you getting ensnared and entrapped in the legacy system. Yes, in a way, I can see how this is good news, but in reality, I don't think so. This is going to keep people from innovating in how to end run the SEC. And this is just, again, it's going to firmly entrench you into the way business has always been done. That's what this is. That's why the SEC is lowering restrictions. It's to get you essentially into their clutches. They don't want you to figure out ways to fund that they can't get a piece of. Now they can get a piece of it. Okay, it's all about just keeping the status quo. That's what I think a lot of this is really about. This is what my good friend Wes Bertrand often calls the statist flypaper. You get attached to it. It's like, oh no, okay, we can do this now. We can work. The government's working with us. We can work with the government. Let's do it. No, like Admiral Akbar said, it's a tarp. No, he actually said it's a trap. But so now crowdfunding, I mean, wonderful things have happened with crowdfunding. There's no doubt about that. In fact, a great listener of the show, she sent me an article about how, there's been a lot of research in psychedelics, having to do with, therapy and things of that nature that happen through crowdfunding that has nothing to do with the government at all. And I think that's very, very interesting areas to explore. There's great things that can happen with crowdfunding. Okay, but crowdfunding in and of itself, I think this deserves a little bit of discussion because crowdfunding itself has very much been co-opted and there's problems. One thing I talked about earlier. Well, first off, let's talk about Kickstarter, the most popular of crowdfunding sources, right? And Kickstarter, pretty much everybody across the board, especially in tech journalism, has now come to the conclusion that Kickstarter is really just a pre-order program. It is not what it was originally. Originally, it was about you having some kind of passion about something, whether it's the Veronica Mars movie or, take your pick of the project. And you knew that Hollywood or whoever, the system as it is, just would not get this shit funded. And so you said, you know what? Me and a million friends or, a million acquaintances are going, fans are going to make this happen. And that's a beautiful thing. Kickstarter was a beautiful thing at one point. Now, I mean, you look like what's happening with the Pebble color and all this stuff. I mean, Kickstarter's not for that. Like that's not the point of crowdfunding. Pebble didn't need to go through that process. So that's kind of gone the way of the dodo. Though I do want to say, speaking of a good crowdfunding thing, this is actually through Indiegogo, which is kind of falling prey to the same thing Kickstarter is. But LRN.FM, we want to get LRN.FM back on in Africa through KU-band satellite. There's a link in the appendix of the show notes. Please check that out. That is a good thing to do with crowdfunding. That's money well spent, and it's not a bullshit tactic going on. Okay, but Kickstarter, by and large, a lot of these systems, by and large, are just turning into pre-order services. So now I want to talk about Patreon because this is also another popular kind of crowdfunding, way to get paid and whatever. And I see a lot of people using Patreon, even people that I'm admittedly kind of shocked to have a Patreon page. And here's the odd thing about this is with Patreon. Now I have a Patreon page. Okay, patreon.com/sovereigntech, I believe. Or it's in the support us tab on sovereigntech.ninja. Patreon has and I didn't do this, but it has a reward system where if I get so many pledges or donations a month, I will do this. Now, anybody that actually runs a business, okay, even a non-hierarchical one, knows that's not it's false incentives. You don't pay somebody it's like, well, look, hey, if you pay me this much, I mean, this is what it equates to. If you pay me, this is the employee or this is the Patreon, not the patron, but the Patreon. If you pay me this much, I'll do this. Everybody knows that's terrible business practice. No. You deliver the quality content first, and then you get recognized by an increasing of donations or /pay. So Patreon, while it makes for an easy way to pay things, I think the reward system is a reverse incentive from what's actually a good way to do any kind of business or any kind of, voluntary interaction. Because it's saying, I'll only do this if I make this much or whatever. And so I think that's crap. And Kickstarter kind of does that sort of thing too. I mean, I get it. It doesn't have to be that way, but by and large, I think that's a way that can work, or at least that's how it ends up working. Now, I mean, yes, if you're doing a production model of some kind, then look, if we get more money, we can produce this. Of course, that makes sense. But if you're just a content producer, no, the reward system doesn't make sense. I don't mean like the LRN.FM thing. I mean, that requires the purchasing of a product. Okay. But I mean, if you're just a content producer, like a blogger or something like that, or a podcaster, no, I think this is absolute reverse incentives. That just doesn't make any sense, and people should be doing it out of their own out of their own passion anyway. So, but the system, crowdfunding can be a very good thing, no doubt about that. But I think we need to be a little more particular, because the real system I think that's going to work, and what will be very much perhaps the economy of the future, or at least maybe even, as much as I don't believe that there should be incremental changes, but an iterative point towards the economy of the future, will be PWYW. Pay what you want. I've talked about it on Sovryn Tech before, but I really do think that this is the genuine future, because, so much of this stuff gets co-opted by advertising and marketers and these companies that just don't need it to actually deliver the goods. I got to believe Pebble has enough money to make color pebbles, and then they could just sell them outright. I didn't crowdfund for Hypercronius. No way. I'll deliver it, then you can pay for it. Okay. I mean, that's the way things, should get done. And believe me, I've got all the incentive of the world, to get this baby out there. So that's the thing, is that it should come out of passion. Anybody's, desire for something should come out of a personal passion. It should come out of your own intrinsic motivation, your intrinsic incentives, before it comes from an external incentive. And so I think pay what you want is really going to very much be the future of how all that works. But it's interesting to see that even a pay what you want system, like Patreon is, because you can set, how much you want to, how much money you want to put in. Even a pay what you want system can have the wrong incentives. It can create a bad business model, a bad entrepreneurial model. So that's something very much to consider. And I mean, and like the crowdfunding, I think people are tired, because one of the reasons people, getting back to the Bitcoin story about with the SEC, lowering restrictions and all that, I think, and I hope, or at least I hope, people are completely burned out on this whole idea of funding things through tokens. Okay, because, they're expecting some kind of, return on it that isn't about a return of their passion. It's about, some kind of like crazy investment in speculation. And that's the problem. A lot of things, like there was that big podcasting event in Las Vegas this week, the New Media Expo and all that. That's not about people having a passion for podcasting. That's about speculation and marketers, wanting to dig in and like, okay, how can I turn this into a bunch of money? And that's no fun. Like when I go to a convention of some kind, I want to go there to have some fucking fun. Like Bitcoin conferences aren't fun anymore. Science fiction conferences, like those used to be tons of fun. Yes, there's a bunch of stuff to sell there to you, but some things you really wanted, that were available there. And if they weren't offering what you wanted, the market spoke. Okay, so we need to be really clear on this, that this SEC stuff is really just about getting you into the system, and be concerned, be careful about even the, what seem like pay what you want, crowdfunding and whatever systems, they may have the completely wrong incentives, and could lead to very bad business models. So a lot of stuff to consider on that. And of course, feel free to get in touch with me if you disagree or you have counterpoints. I'm always open to those. But pay what you want. That's definitely going to be the future. Let's just make sure we do it right. I'll be back with more.
Time now for 90 Seconds on Sex with Dr. Paul.
We all know about the special relationship a man's hand has with his penis. But I think that researchers in Korea have taken this too far, and they've made some questionable claims about it. They say that by comparing the respective lengths of a man's index and ring fingers, that they can predict the length of his penis. Well, maybe in Korea, but nowhere else in the world that I know of. The underlying theory has to do with the idea that certain hormones that circulate in the womb contribute to the length of an infant's penis. Well, some scientists believe that these same hormones contribute to the length of the ring finger. Now, while this is a fascinating area of study, it still remains very controversial. Unfortunately, the media reported this study's controversial claims as though they were actual fact. Now, if you want to read my rant about the problems some of us have with this Korean study, I've posted a link on our website. Now, if you have a burning need to know the length of a particular guy's penis, you're better off asking him to show it to you than measuring his ring and index fingers and pulling out a calculator. As for the unfortunate magazine articles that were inspired by this study, with titles like What Your Hand Says About Your Penis, the answer is little, if anything at all.
For more, visit 90secondsonsex.com.
I just received an encrypted message from Decentral with your next mission, and it looks like I'm coming along.
Why, Elizabeth, I wouldn't have it any other way. You're clearly good at staying on top of things.
It helps when one's partner is very skilled.
No, we can have more fun later. What does the message say?
Important messages.
It is time for Important Messages, where, of course, I cover questions that get sent to me through all the ways available to get in touch with the show. Of course, go to sovereigntech.ninja, look at the Contact Us tab, and there's plenty of ways to do it. You can be as anonymous as you want. You take your pick of the way you want to get in touch with me. Feel free to follow me on Twitter as well. People have sent me questions that way. Lots of ways to do it. And I'm kind of, some of my segments are running long here, so so I'm going to brush through a couple of these questions. I won't read the whole thing just because I want to be able to, to get to, because there's a couple of interesting topics that I got asked about. But before I do, a correction. Last week I talked about, when Stephanie and I were on, we talked about Minilock. And Minilock.io is this really well done file transfer, encrypted file transfer system. It does the encryption for you, does the sending for you, all the good stuff. It's fantastic. Really like how that's set up. And so I'm going to read this listener's email here. Just got done listening to the latest episode. I do agree that the blog spam has to stop. Now, that was in reference to last week, how I was complaining about so much of these Liberty news sources and all that stuff are just full of garbage. So he kind of referencing that, and they use bullshit marketing tactics, which kind of goes back to what we were just talking about in the last segment there about pay what you want being the future and none of this way things are now. A quick correction to yours and Stephanie's conversation on Minilock. If Minilock goes away, because Minilock is a Chrome extension, I'm just stallion breaking in here. And, Stephanie had brought the great point of what happens with CryptoKit where it disappears. If it gets taken away from the Play Store or if Google strong arms their client, like we mentioned earlier with Google Chrome, and just rips, because that's what happened with CryptoKit. The CryptoKit Chrome app just disappeared from your browser. Nothing you could do. There was a couple things you could do, but it was, really quite the shock. So, and the lovely and hyper intelligent just brought me an excellent thirst quencher. So thank you. All right. Yeah. All live here. No. So if Minilock goes away, so that was a concern. What if, Google rips away Minilock? There is a Python 3 package plus sources called Deadlock available already as a C language, as a C implementation. It is rock solid. You might want to warn people that all decrypted files should be subject to the same scrutiny regularly downloaded files require until the signature verification functionality hits Minilock. It might not. It is intended to be quick, thus Deadlock. Files might need to be hash checked not for integrity, but for authenticity. I tried subscribing to the Zog blog. Okay, so I'll cut that off there. That I addressed that earlier. But anyway, good points to bring up. This is something that's still kind of in beta and needs to be looked at and should always be treated with scrutiny. The best advice anybody can ever give as far as, online security or computer security, digital security in general is just, act as if everything's cracked, you know what I mean? And act accordingly. But Minilock, is a nice implementation, but yeah, there's still things getting worked out. And I really appreciate the emailer bringing that point up because it's an important one. So let's see. Next one. This actually was sent to me on the SoundCloud for last week's episode on 119. And actually, the emailer, that wasn't an emailer. That was also sent through the SoundCloud messaging system. So do keep that in mind that you can use that as well. And I do check all of these things. But this was something that was posted on episode 119, because on SoundCloud, you could actually post right on the sound. And let's see. They're all catering. This is in reference. I mentioned how I was complaining about a lot of libertarian news sources, how they're pretty much libertarian preschool, and that I felt that was really... that it's more important. What I had said last week during the climax was that you need to say, don't do these, incremental like buildups, in education into liberty. What made me an anarchist was a guy saying, who says we need a Navy? Just like, no, it just doesn't have to exist. It was such a shocking statement. It shook my core. And so I think, now I'm not saying do things to shock, but I am saying, don't be incremental. Don't say, well, like I said last week, don't say, we need to, we'll decrease the size of the Navy or something like that. No, you just say, no, you don't need it. Okay. So reading on here. So he's referencing that segment of the show from last week. They're all catering. He's talking about the bloggers and others. They're all catering to the LCD, lowest common denominator, with quantity over quality because money. It's refreshing to have a podcast with integrity and on the cutting edge, so you should feel honored that you are one of the few leading the way. You, sir, are a leader, not a follower. Thank you very much for the kind words. I really do appreciate that. I definitely like to think that Sovryn Tech is very much on the cutting edge. I certainly, that's very much on purpose. And I recognize that lends itself, as I've talked on the show before, actually just a couple episodes, I remember talking about this a couple episodes ago, it lends itself to not being popular. I mean, because, it's just, I guess maybe because it's that far ahead of the game, or a person, has to be at a certain mindset at the time, maybe to really appreciate everything that's said. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what the ingredients are there, but this is about me talking about what I want to talk about. So that's what gets put out there. Though you certainly, can take control with Tech Roulette, and obviously during important messages, I'll talk about what you want me to talk about. So something that people have wanted me to talk about, we've got a couple questions here. Hopefully I can do them both justice. One is Zerotasking. Now, this is the daily meditation that I go through. I had mentioned it in a special, I think that lovely and hyper intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy and I were doing. She had no idea that I was doing it every day. And so some people wanted to know, what is that, what does that look like for me? What is this, what is your definition of meditation? And so that's really the best way I can explain it. It is that it is the antithesis of multitasking. And so I call it, I've ended up calling it Zerotasking. And how it starts off, this is definitely something you have to train yourself into. And the benefits of it are just overall kind of clarity, kind of peace of mind. There's nothing woo-woo about it. It's just that it's a good way to, you don't start the day with a bunch of stress. You start the day with peace in your own head, the very first place that there needs to be peace. So that's really what it's all about. And generally what you do is for about a week, you sit down for, you try as long as you can, you try to, the optimal for me is about a half hour that I zero task or meditate for. But you sit down and you try for at least 15 minutes for the first week, the first time you're doing this. You can let your mind just run wherever you want, okay? But you sit down and, and in a chair, don't lay down, you don't have to do any cross-legged, stuff, but it's fine if you want to, okay? Make sure it's quiet. And just sit in a chair, with good posture. Posture's good. Posture's good for breathing, right? It's not just, something crazy to say. There's good reasons to have, posture when you're sitting, and just be relaxed and just sit there, but don't move. Just be absolutely still. And do that for a week. You can let your mind do whatever you want. But the first thing is just getting your body to where it just doesn't move other than your breathing. Okay. And so you do that and you try to get that to, try to allow for that for at least 15 minutes. Okay. The first week. And then if you can get that to happen, or if you can make that happen in less than a week, awesome. Move on to step 2. And just step 2 is then you start to work on thinking about absolutely nothing and just working on awareness, but not thinking about anything. That's like the second week. Okay. And you try that out for 15 minutes. And that's the point you want to build to. Then, after that, if you can get to where, both your brain and your body are doing practically nothing, or at least, it's essentially nothing. I mean, obviously it's doing something, but, you're not thinking about anything. I mean, then you can kind of, if you want to, like then in the third week, you want to start building up to, can you do that longer? And I don't know that it's necessary to do it any longer than a half hour. Okay. But then, you can, when you're meditating at that point, then you can kind of concentrate on certain things if you want, but it is tough to describe how exactly, like when you start to concentrate on things, once you're able to, to use the colloquialism, quiet your mind and quiet your body, and still your body. It's pretty amazing kind of what happens there. like the thoughts that come up, you never realized you even had in your head. It's really quite the thing. So Zerotasking, I think, is just a wonderful thing. It's a great way to just start your day. And obviously I imagine if someone is feeling particularly stressful, you don't have to just do it once a day. You could do it, in the middle of the day and just shut everything down and hit the reset button on your system. You know what I mean? In a way. So I think Zerotasking is just a really great thing. So very simple. See, there's nothing woo-woo there. It's just very basic. I find it very helpful. I find it helpful with creativity and all that stuff. That's where some of my, not to say that maybe there's no new ideas under the sun, but some of my more creative ideas, I generally find that I have then. I mean, the best way to equate it, and I know this is going to be funny, but I mean, especially if you don't bring your smartphone with you or a book or anything, if you just sit down at a toilet, it's amazing what thoughts come up for you when you're just sitting there quietly, in the one space left on planet Earth where one can actually, steal themselves, a moment of quiet and peace. I know that sounds crazy, but it's very, very relative to that, to where just, these thoughts come to you. And that doesn't mean that they're all, thoughts of brilliance. They could just be thoughts of, I don't know, something you didn't address or that you forgot about or whatever, or something new, but it's interesting. It's something to explore. So do try out Zerotasking/meditation if you like. Again, there's no mysticism. There's no spiritualism, nothing of the sort. Okay. It has nothing to do with that. And yes, I do it daily, every single day. I mean, maybe there's a day where I have to skip it, for whatever reason. But generally I do it every day. So it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to get to the second question, which had to do with kind of city versus the country living. I'll have to talk about that. I'll save that for next week, maybe, or even push it off a little bit more. But that's a really, really interesting topic. So anyway, please do, if you have questions, keep in mind, you can ask me anything you want. Okay. And very simple. It's in the show notes. It's also in the contact us page at sovereigntech.ninja or zomiofflinegames.com. And you can get in touch with me. And again, it doesn't have to be science and tech related. It's fine if it is. Okay. And I'm always interested in your thoughts. I have a great listenership that really keeps a great eye on things. So I'll be back with more.
Are you sick of government lackeys who say you didn't build that? Are you tired of elitists like Barack Obama and Al Gore taking credit for the web while trying to take over the web? Are you disgusted by experts whose concept of the internet is that it's a series of tubes? Take back the free market of computing by encouraging software developers to adopt the BIPCOT no-gov license. The BIPCOT no-gov license allows any use or modification except by governments. Go to bipcot.org. That's Bravo, India, Papa, Charlie, Oscar, Tango.org.
Do you still have it?
Got it right here. How does this affect System D?
I don't know. The message just said it was important.
I think we need to find out more about this.
Tool of the Week.
It is time for Tool of the Week, where I cover, it could be a piece of software, it could be a website, could even be something physical, that I think is useful. Sometimes I might review something that's shit, but that I think is useful and, is something that people can check out and try out. Sometimes it's a preview for something to come, certainly. But this week, this is something that's here right now. It is in beta, but this is really exciting. And, I talk a lot about how I want multiple internets. I mean, actually recently, I don't know if I've shared this already, but recently I've heard on nationally syndicated radio, people saying that we need multiple internets. We need multiple internet infrastructures. We need multiple worldwide webs, and I think that that's something that's coming, either a lot of companies like Apple and Google, Microsoft, whoever else, Facebook, are doing it. In fact, that's another thing I've heard people recently say is that Facebook is trying to create its own internet. Like as in literally they're trying to create their own World Wide Web. Okay. I think that, and please, I called that a year and a half ago, and I thought I was crazy saying that sort of thing. But now, mainstream tech journalists are admitting to this. So I want multiple implementations. And so, there's exciting ones out there. There's MadeSafe, the most exciting of the bunch. There's ZeroNet. Okay. There's Tribbler. And, there's a bunch of these and we've covered a lot of them. Okay. But one that's actually, now some of those Tribbler exists, but it's not really doing everything that it kind of talked about that it wanted to do. ZeroNet is still very much in development. MadeSafe is very much in development, looking forward to it though, of course. But this is something that's kind of out there and it's called Project Maelstrom and it's from BitTorrent Inc. as in the guys, that invented BitTorrent. And, they have a beta available for this, but right now it's only for Windows, which is interesting, because a lot of BitTorrent, the company, BitTorrent Inc., they have a lot of different products. And for some reason, most of them are only on Windows. I'm not really sure what's behind that, or at least right now, and they're still kind of beta. Maybe it's just because it's the largest user base. I can totally understand that logic. But this is them admitting we want to solve the problems that the present internet has. Okay. And so they are trying to do a hybrid of, using BitTorrent type technology to create an internet where you can even play games via BitTorrent, not download the game, but actually play it, via BitTorrent. And you can download this. And I downloaded it. You can try it out right now if you have a Windows machine. And they said there's an OS X version coming fast. And, it essentially uses Chromium. It uses a Chromium browser. Okay. And what it does is so it's a web browser that's what you're downloading. And it operates by not going to, a DNS entry, not by going to a web address, but it uses magnet links. Okay. You click on the magnet link, which if you ever download anything or if you ever torrent anything, if you ever download anything to torrent, you're used to clicking on like a magnet link, like from the Pirate Bay or Kick-Ass Torrents or whatever. And then it just opens up your torrent client and you start downloading the file. Very simple, very, nice, easy implementation. So essentially BitTorrent Inc. has replaced the hyperlink with a magnet link. Okay. They've replaced the URL with a magnet link. Maybe that's more accurate. And it works decently well. And the idea is good. And this is the thing, I want all of these to exist. I want Project Maelstrom. I want ZeroNet. I want Tribbler. I want MadeSafe. Let them all run. Okay. And I think it's something that's very interesting, to explore and perhaps more interesting, in this. And so, because let's be clear, Project Maelstrom they are gunning for a serverless internet. Awesome. That's the dream. Okay. But what's interesting is that BitTorrent is really creating this impressive suite of software. You have, BitTorrent Sync, which is, cloud storage, but, done in a more secure and, more direct and perhaps even more, a redundant, fashion. Okay. And redundancy being a good thing in this case, more resilient. That's the word I was looking for, more resilient. Then they have Bleep, which is that's their secure messaging protocol. Now, part of the problem is, and I think Project Maelstrom is open source, but some of their stuff is not open source yet. And so that kind of becomes an issue, but maybe that will come in time. I hope. Okay. Bleep might be open source, but I'm pretty sure to date that BitTorrent Sync is not. So anyway, they have the technology, right? To quote the $6 Million Man intro, they have the technology, and they are creating an entire little ecosystem. They're coming out of nowhere with all this stuff. And I'm curious what that's all going to end up looking like when it all comes together. Will there be a BitTorrent OS? Is that something that's happening? And like I said, let's have the options. Let's have choice. Let's have all of these out there, because some are going to have advantages over others in one area. And, but you can try it out. Project Maelstrom, link is in the show notes. Really interesting stuff.
Hey, this is Michael Dean from the Freedom Fiends radio show. I've been working with computer programmer Derek Slopey to create Fiend Phone. I'm using Fiend Phone right now to talk with and record one of my co-hosts in real time. Take it, Davi.
Hey, this is Davi Barker, and I'm 1,000 miles away from Michael, but we sound like we're in the same room.
We sure do, Davi. So, Davi, please tell the nice people more about Fiend Phone.
Fiend Phone is free, open-source software that opens up a global world of possibilities for collaborative, high-quality remote voice media production, and I'm digging it.
People can try the Windows beta version of Fiend Phone right now at fiendphone.com. But we're also raising money to vastly improve Fiend Phone and vastly improve independent talk media worldwide.
So go to fiendphone.com to help out. Who will build the audio roads? We will, with your help.
That's fiendphone.com. FEENPHONE.com. Foxtrot, Echo, November, phone.com.
Fiend Phone. I never knew remote audio could be this good.
We're never going to make it out alive if those blockchain drones get off the ground.
I can handle that. You just find us another ride.
Get on!
Nice moves. When did you learn that?
On with you. No guns, no killing. Are the drones taken care of?
They are now. Nothing works better than a quick hack. Let's get going.
Hacksec.
It is time for Hacksec, where I cover issues of hackers and security. And, of course, on this show, hackers are heroes. Black hat, white hat, gray hat, doesn't matter. I think that they are absolute heroes, and we will call them such. But this week, this is interesting. This is definitely a security issue. And, this whole episode, admittedly, and please don't read this as arrogance. I just want to make sure that people know, I'm kind of highlighting, Sovryn Tech to say that, that Sovryn Tech gets information out there decently ahead of the curve. Okay. And, a listener that's been listening, for the past, couple of years, is taking in a lot of info. And I, in fact, you can email me and tell me if you feel this way. Do you feel that like when you read the news now, you're seeing things that, hey, wait a minute, I already knew that was coming. I'd be interested to hear that sort of thing. It's not nothing to do with ego there. Seriously. But this whole episode feels like it's just a bunch of I told you so's. And something that came out this week that everybody, oh my God, I can't believe this existed. We talked about, not just we, it was actually, I think it was originally a Slate article, but I remember it was like episode 61 or it was in the 60s of Sovryn Tech that we talked about, Special Operations 303. And this story's from Ars Technica, and we'll talk about it here. Court mulls revealing secret government plan to cut cell phone service. SOP 303 mobile phone kill switch policy would endanger public if disclosed. A federal appeals court is asking the Obama administration to explain why the government should be allowed to keep secret its plan to shutter mobile phone service during critical emergencies. The Department of Homeland Security came up with the plan known as Standard Operating Procedure 303 after cellular phones were used to detonate explosives targeting a London public transportation system. SOP 303 is a powerful tool in the digital age, and it spells out a unified voluntary process for the orderly shutdown and restoration of wireless services during critical emergencies, such as the threat of radio-activated improvised explosive devices, end quote. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit in February sided with the government and ruled that the policy did not need to be disclosed under a Freedom of Information Act request from the Electronic Privacy Information Center. The court agreed with the government's citation of a FOIA exemption that precludes disclosure of, if doing so, quote, could reasonably be expected to endanger the life or physical safety of any individual, end quote. Safety. Yeah, right. Safety from who? Not the government. Epic asked the court, that's the electronic, board there, or Privacy Information Center, asked the court to revisit its ruling, arguing that the decision, quote, if left in place would create an untethered national security exemption, end quote, in FOIA law. On Friday, the court ordered the government to respond, a move that suggests the appellate court might rehear the case. Epic originally asked for the document in 2011 in the wake of the shutdown of mobile phone service in the San Francisco Bay Area subway system during a protest. The government withheld the information. Epic sued and won, but the government then appealed and prevailed. It's like, okay, well, we'll give, Stallion cutting in, Epic, we'll give you money. Fine. Yeah, you're right. We're not going to give it to you, but you can sue us and then we'll just pay you the suit, but we're still going to keep this shit a secret. In its petition for rehearing, Epic argued that the appellate court's decision created a catch-all provision that would allow federal agencies to routinely withhold records subject to disclosure where the agency merely asserts a speculative security risk, end quote. You know, it's funny, Stallion cutting in again. We were talking about Meerkat, the streaming video services, and how they're used for cop blocking, and everybody talks about, cops wearing, cameras, body cameras, that's going to be a fine and dandy thing. Well, let me tell you, Standard Operations 303 will just lay that to waste. It's like, well, what good's the streaming video if you can't fucking transmit it? Reading on. Under the direction of the so-called National Security Telecommunications Advisory Committee, SOP 303 SOP 303, maybe that's what we should call it, allows for the shutting down of wireless networks, quote, within a localized area such as a tunnel or bridge and within an entire metropolitan area, end quote. There have been no publicly disclosed instances when SOP 303 has been invoked, but the telecoms have agreed to shutter service when SOP 303 is invoked. Telecom being Sprint, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, take your pick. The local governments, however, have the power to shutter wireless service regardless of SOP 303. So the Standard Operations 303 isn't even necessary. The last known time mobile phone service was cut by a government agency was the San Francisco example from 2011. That's when the Bay Area Rapid Transit System took heat for disabling service to quell a protest in 4 downtown San Francisco stations. The 3-hour outrage was done after BART cut service without the assistance of the telecos. In the aftermath, BART produced a new policy that said service could only be cut off when, quote, there is strong evidence of imminent unlawful activity that threatens the safety of direct passengers, employees, and other members of the public, end quote. So, this is, when I talked about it last, this was an episode, it might even be the very first episode where I went on a real tirade, because the story had come out, again, this is a year and a half ago, however long ago. A story came out that the FBI had could take complete control of, your camera, and that they could follow you where you were based upon, where you logged in with your email or whatever, and that they could turn on the camera without even the little light turning on, next to the camera there. And I said, look, it's like, the government, hell, what does any of this even matter? I mean, the government has an internet kill switch. It's absolutely true. It's called Standard Operations 303. That was my direct quote from that episode. And now it's coming out. Now people are suddenly saying, holy shit, this thing's real. I mean, we already knew it was real. Slate was where I heard it from. Okay. But this is a thing. Now, there's solutions to this, but there's a problem, and I'll talk about that. Okay. There are solutions to this, but let's be clear that, everybody talks about, oh, what if there's an internet kill switch? Well, in many ways, the government already has it. Okay. Especially if everything becomes wireless, then it's even easier to implement that sort of thing, I would think. So what you could do to solve this is use things like FireChat, which we've talked about in the past. okay, and, have like mesh networking solutions, like the Greenstone, which we've also talked about on Sovryn Tech in the past. Both of those actually come from the same company, Open Garden. You could create this mesh networking system, okay, that could subvert even if Sprint turns off cell phone signal, fine, I'll just use Bluetooth. But then here's the interesting thing, is that I wonder, because so we know SOP 303 exists, okay, that can turn all this stuff off, but we don't know to what degree it can do what it does. We know it can cover an entire metropolitan area, it could cover a city, but we don't know what exactly that all entails. Now, the other thing that suddenly, for your safety from thieves and whatever else, not the thieves in government, but, people that might take your wallet or steal your phone or something, the U.S. Senate pretty much told everybody, hey, you've got to put a kill switch in cell phones that'll just brick that cell phone. What if in SOP 303, when it says, okay, kill the signal, kill the internet, it then says, and make sure you kill all the devices too, because all these devices have this kill switch, built in by, the production companies themselves, Samsung, Apple, you take your pick. That's something we've known about for years, actually, on Sovryn Tech, was that Apple made it very easy for the police to turn off, all the transmissions from iPhones. So Apple's been in bed with the government a lot longer than any of these other companies, but now they all are. Now so it's not just an internet kill switch, it's a device kill switch. And it's over. What so terrifying exists in order SOP 303 that they'll pay people off to keep from having to respond to a FOIA request? I wonder. And this leads to why I often talk about, and have been talking about, honestly, ever since I first heard of SOP 303, is relying upon a lot of these mobile devices. You might want to, if you are an activist, if you are, whatever that looks like, if you are, a privacy activist, liberty activist, you take your pick, if you are concerned about the ability that you're going to be in a hot situation, and you want to be able to communicate, you might want to look into what that looks like for you. And I've recommended to people, stop relying upon mobile devices. Stop relying upon mobile communication. Okay? I don't know that there's a device that, the closest thing, I keep the link in the show notes for it because I recommend everybody get one. That's the Libreboot X200. Okay? It's a refurbished, backwards engineered ThinkPad X200. Okay? And, I don't even know if that would, could survive whatever kind of, turn all the shit off, stuff the government has. Okay. But to rely, more upon, or to not rely upon a lot of these mobile communication systems, I think, or at least to work on that, would be a very, very healthy thing to do. So this is interesting. I find it ironic that now suddenly everybody's like, oh, what the hell is this SOP 303? And it's like, well, where were you? We knew about this. We knew about this in 2013, 2012. This isn't new news. A lot of this stuff gets hidden all the time. There's was the room 623 or room 263, whatever that room is that they found in 2007 or 2008 that the U.S. government finally admitted existed, that there were entire hotel rooms and apartments where spy equipment was set up, and that whole apartment was just there to listen into wireless communications, and that they were set up since like 2001 and even earlier. In fact, there was another story that the lovely hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy sent me that said, the DEA could have stopped bombings because they've been recording, mobile communications and phone communications for so long. They didn't even need the Patriot Act.
Babylon 5 ended a great war and united 100 alien races in peace. Danger didn't die. It just went underground, with new heroes and new evils to carry the torch.
We need to make sure they all understand we will not be intimidated.
What is wrong with you people?
We have to pit him against himself.
It's an entire new season of Babylon 5, with all new episodes.
Babylon 5 is available for download on your favorite torrent site. See it now to experience the greatest show in television history. Babylon 5.
Oh, we made it.
They're not kidding when they say you're the best, Mr. Sovryn.
Oh, Elizabeth, you haven't seen anything yet.
Oh, really?
Really? Why don't I show you?
Right here? Out in the woods? On the bike?
Elizabeth, I can rise to any occasion.
Ew. Brian. The Climax.
It is time for the Climax, where I cover whatever the hell I want to talk about. You take your pick. It could be a movie. It could be anything. Okay. It could be a topic. And this week it's actually going to be a bit of a topic. But before I get into that, I know everything I just said during Hacksec sounded like, all very dire, but that's the beauty of all these alternative, communication systems, internet infrastructures that are getting developed. That's the beauty of them. Is that, the answers are coming long before any of the shit even gets used, or that we know of, at least, that it's been used. So exciting, really, really exciting stuff. It's the mother of necessity, like really, that a lot of these things are getting developed because people are realizing, hey, we could lose all this because there's central points of failure, i.e. the government, or i.e. servers, whatever. And so I think that's interesting, but what I want to talk about right now, because, and actually this dovetails nicely. I think everything would already be completely interconnected and centrally controlled if it wasn't for one single thing. And actually, I think that the bulk of a lot of, everybody, we were reading a story earlier about, everybody's got a computer in their pocket and all this shit. The bulk of advancement in speeds, internet speeds, technological speed, all this stuff. Okay, speeds of computers, whatever, processor speeds, RAM, all this shit. We have one single thing to thank for all of this technological development, in my opinion. And it's not what you think. And in fact, it's the one thing I think that is keeping everything from being, completely centrally cloud connected. I think there's something to be said for having a decentralized cloud, evolving the cloud. I think that's a fine thing to look into, much like Project Maelstrom, MaidSafe, stuff like that are doing. Okay. But the thing that there's still something to be said for having, files offline. Like, it's amazing, I don't use Netflix. I don't use any of that stuff. I keep all my own files. I have, the entire Star Trek collection on a hard drive and all that stuff. And yes, the hard drive can fail. I know, but it's incredible how there's no buffering speeds when I want to watch an episode of Star Trek because I have it offline. There's something to be said, okay, for not being connected to the internet in those cases. And so a lot of this stuff, what's really keeping, Google from owning the internet or Amazon from owning the internet through their centralized cloud structures, and what's actually, again, still continually pushing the boundaries of what computers can do is one thing. It's not Photoshop, though that's close. Gaming. PC gaming at that. Okay. And now I'm not just saying this. I'm not trying to raise any kind of importance for gaming because, I'm a game developer. Okay. I mean this. And I said this actually a while ago on various social media where I said people need to really stop and thank the PC gaming master race as it's sometimes some people have issues with that phrase. I don't. You have them to thank for very much for a lot of the modern world that you live in. If there's something you enjoy, believe me, it's because of them. And why is that? Well, let me explain. A lot of I don't think anybody, and you can read articles from the early 90s where people are like, all right, stop. We don't need GUIs. We don't need the graphic user interface. Okay. The command line is just fine and dandy. And please, Stallion here, I'm telling you, there's something to be said for the command line. Like, you can get shit done. Okay. But for the average person who doesn't know how to work a command line, the GUI is your life's blood in the digital space, in the digital realm. And you have gamers to thank for that, because it was only video gaming that went to the creation of, 3D graphics cards, that went to, pushing, we need more processor power because we got to, because that led to the GUI, and we got to push this GUI more. I mean, all this stuff. I know Xerox created the GUI, perhaps even before there was gaming. But then let's go back even further. Let's go to to MIT, where a lot of the original computing, done at MIT, this was the hobby clubs back in the 50s and 60s and whatever, was all about making games like Computer Wars and Space Wars. Those were the names of some of those games. Okay, all this stuff, everything, even if you love television, the modern advances in television, even cable, originally had to do with being able to do gaming. The guy that first came up with, with cable television and using coaxial and all that, a lot of that was actually meant to work with like the Odyssey console, the Odyssey gaming system. Okay. Computers originally didn't even think about gaming. It was Atari that pushed that forward with their various very popular computers that were also gaming systems at the time. Now people can't picture computers not being gaming systems, but at the time that was very revolutionary back in the 80s. The Commodore 64, arguably the greatest computer of all time, or maybe the Amiga, both of them were just, totally pushed and got out there because of gaming. The reason that everything isn't online, the reason why cloud computing centralized cloud computing hasn't taken over is because you can't get that 4K. Streaming over the bulk of the internet connections that exist out there. But the reason that there's gigabit internet is in many ways, the reason that there's these faster internet speeds in many ways was originally developed, or at least at the consumer level, was developed so that like these really fast routers and things like that was to service LAN parties, which LAN parties are where, a bunch of PC gamers bring their rigs and they all sit down, and they go to town on each other. Take that how you want. Your Android phone, your iPhone, whatever, has all that power, is a quad core now, is this and that, and does all these things. Why? Because of mobile gaming, because of Riptide GP2. Take your pick of the game. One could even argue Facebook, that social media, a lot of social media is very popular because of things like Candy Crush, not or Farmville or Mafia Wars, not necessarily because of the communications, because it created a multiplayer system. It's all of it is thanks to gaming. And ironically, it's gaming and gaming alone, even though BitTorrent now is talking about, okay, how can we get gaming to work over a BitTorrent-like technology? That's what they're doing. One of the things they're talking about doing with Project Maelstrom. Okay. Gaming is the thing that is showing all the cracks in centralized internet systems and centralized cloud computing. Gaming is actually, in many ways, PC gaming in particular is saving the world right now from SOP 303 in a very real sense, because it's still highlighting the importance of offline ability and of the fact that the these centralized nodes are, they can't handle it. They can't take Lara Croft's boobs. And good. I'm glad they can't handle it. Now, some may want to contrast this with my comments about video. Okay. That's more just about, video, because I had said that, look, video is what's keeping a lot of people from adopting a lot of these, alternative internet technologies because, well, shit, you can't do video over it. So what the hell's the point? I'm not gonna bother with it. But keep in mind, I'm talking about, we're talking about a hybrid here of like the fact of offline still being important, because all these people, they just want all their, video. And that's what I was talking about earlier, how, boy, no buffering speeds. It's fucking amazing to do it offline. Video, I think, is a far better experience, offline anyway. So different story there. Okay. But I think this point needs to be hit home. And gaming is also showing some other interesting cracks. In fact, this week there was a story. I didn't know if I was going to do this for a main story or not, but I'll do it here. There was a game that came out in 97 called Postal. The game content is incredibly objectionable. There's no doubt. All right. because it's a game where you go postal, as in, and in the 90s there was an epidemic that was occurring where, U.S. post office workers, colonial post office workers, as it were just going nuts at their job and killing people. Okay. And so there was a game called Postal where it was all about, you going nuts and you wiping out the entire cheerleading squad and whatever else. And I'm not saying this is a good game. I'm just laying it out there. And this recently was ported to Android, to mobile systems. The interesting thing that happened is, okay, and it's been ported, like you can get it on Steam, I think, and GOG, and you can even get it on Amazon or whatever. And the interesting thing is that people freaked out. Like the Amazon App Store said, no, it was up for $1.99, and they took it down within a few hours because of the objectionable content or whatever, because there was sexual stuff and violent stuff. And that's it. There's sex and violence in it to an extreme level, so they took it down. Okay. And then the Google Play Store did the same thing. They took it down so you couldn't get it on Android. But both of them left all of the Grand Theft Auto games up, which in the Grand Theft Auto games, I could go around with a flamethrower and torch anybody I wanted. Somebody's going to take that out of context. There is a massive contradiction there, clearly. Like, it didn't make any sense that you would not, you would leave Grand Theft Auto up and yet you would take down Postal. It just doesn't gel. And Amazon realized this. Amazon in particular, they reversed the decision. They said, okay, no. All right, Postal's back up on the App Store, because they knew how ridiculous it was, particularly Amazon, because if you go to Amazon.com, you can buy Postal for your PC. And so, like, if they're not going to allow it in the App Store, why the fuck are they allowing it on their main website? There's a huge contradiction here. And so gaming shows, like, it shows the cracks and everything. And as far as I know, Google Play Store still has it taken down. Google has not responded to the fact that why the fuck are you allowing sex and violence on Grand Theft Auto to this level, but you won't let Postal up there? It doesn't make any sense at all. Okay. But gaming is showing how our social mores are completely reversed, skewed, messed up, in that everything's all about making the buck. Because, boy, anybody that doesn't allow for Grand Theft Auto, I mean, this is the biggest gaming franchise, it might become the biggest gaming franchise in history. In fact, Grand Theft Auto 5 is coming out. Please, I play these games. I know the deal. Okay, I'm not being, a conservative of any kind here. I enjoy the Grand Theft Auto games. Vice City is one of my favorite of all time. Okay, but that's out there. But it's showing the contradictions. So my point in all this is, I just want to say is that I think gaming, PC gaming in particular, deserves a huge thank you. It doesn't get enough credit. It is the bastard son of every form of entertainment out there. But it's the only thing that's advancing technology in reality. And don't say Photoshop. I know. Because Photoshop is so goddamn intensive. I used to say, when people would ask me, okay, I want to get a computer, the first question when somebody asks you that, the first question you ask them is, what do you want to do with it? Do you want to do Photoshop? And if they don't want to do Photoshop, that opens up the world. And they say, well, do you want to do gaming? And they don't want to do gaming? Well, then please, you could spend $100 and you'll be fine. Okay. So, but Photoshop wouldn't even be where it is if it wasn't for gaming. Gaming forwarded, if you love the digital world, digital realm that we have existing today, you have gaming and gaming alone to thank for the whole kit and caboodle. I'm not saying you have to say thank you to a gamer next time you see them, but just have some appreciation for the craft. That's all that I recommend. But, I wanted to bring that out there. I mean, really, it's putting a halt to so much of Google's plans. It's putting a halt on Apple's plans, on all these big companies' plans. It puts a stop to all of it. It shows the importance of, it brings up issues of intellectual property issues with, look, if a game isn't developed or sold anymore and nobody's working on it anymore, come on, can't I just have it? But wait a minute, why can't I do this for all of it? It's forwarding, how do you even get, how do you deal with malicious piracy and things like that. I mean, there's all kinds of issues that that gaming is really bringing to fore. And malicious privacy, I mean, like people putting in Bitcoin miners into software. Gaming is the first one that has to deal with that, and they're already starting to solve it. I mean, it's just incredible. So thank you, PC gaming. I love you. and I'll always be a part of you. Anyway, Carpe Lucem, everybody. Please do donate to the show if you feel so compelled and you enjoy what we're doing here. I'll see you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to sovryntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.